Today, I'll be going over 10 essential tips that you need to know for instrument flight training. Watch to the end because you don't want to miss tip number 10. Tip number 1, solidifying basic flying skills. Becoming an IFR rated pilot is a crucial and very big step on your aviation journey. It allows pilots to fly in a variety of weather conditions solely using your instruments. Being an IFR rated pilot gives you a lot more flexibility with your go no-go decisions. Like for instance, if there's a low-level cloud layer, you'll be able to follow an IFR flight plan and get through those clouds and get on top of all that weather and head towards your destination. One thing you're going to have to really take in consideration is your VFR flying skills. Yes, getting your instrument rating, you need a good solid foundation of VFR flying skills. And here's why. While you're getting your private pilot's license, you're focusing on things like smooth and accurate control of the aircraft, navigation skills, all of which are things that you need when you're going through instrument flight training. Tip number 2, understanding instrument flight rules theory. The academic side of IFR flying is pretty heavy. There's a lot of information, a completely and totally different way of flying. During this phase, there's no more looking out the window and referencing the ground and keeping your airplane wings level upright, referencing the ground. Now, you're focused solely on the instruments. And at first, that's going to be a little bit daunting. You're really going to have a tough time just focusing on the instruments and interpreting what the instruments are saying and keeping the airplane wings level, on airspeed, going to the destination that you have selected. And one thing that's going to help you in doing that is really hitting the books hard and understanding navigation, meteorology, the overall instrument functionality. In this video right here, I go over 2 books that I use to help me understand weather systems a lot better. Make sure you check out that video and order those books and get that study. And tip number 3, that's the fact that you're not subscribed to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button so you can boost me up in the algorithm, turn on your post notifications and select all. And while you're doing that, make sure you download my free ebook located in the link in the description below. This ebook has invaluable information. And if you're thinking about becoming a pilot, it has 15 things that you should know before beginning flight training. Make sure you go ahead, click the link in the bio and download your free copy today. Tip number 3, getting to know your instruments. Familiarize yourself with your instruments. Familiarize yourself with your GNS 430 if you have it in the airplane, your GNS 530 or your Aviation system or G1000. Whatever system you're using in the aircraft, make sure you go out to the airplane, sit in there and familiarize yourself with that. Or if you got any flight training devices or basic aircraft training devices and you have everything that I just named attached to these FTDs and BATDs, make sure you go to those and you're working through the flows and you're actually putting in those approaches and you're flying the aircraft, familiarizing yourself with and sitting there and knowing where everything is at so that you can develop muscle memory. And if you're constantly practicing that and you're constantly doing those things, when you get in the airplane, it's a lot easier to do what you need to do because you've done it so many times on the ground. Tip number 4, the power of simulation. I've said this before on multiple videos and I will say it again and I'll keep saying it. Flight simulators are invaluable. They offer risk-free environment to practice and perfect your instrument flying skills. And in this phase of training, flight simulators are great tools that you're going to use to shoot approaches, to work through your flows, briefing the approach, setting it up in your GNS 430 or your G1000, whatever system you got. You're going to be going through those flows. You're going to be actually hand flying, doing everything that you need to do at the same time, keeping your scan alive and making sure the airplane is maintaining wings level, making sure you're still on airspeed, still heading in the right direction. It's a great way to get that flow and get the processes down pat before you go to the plane. And if you can fly the simulator well, when you get in the airplane, it just seems a lot easier. I don't know exactly what it is that causes that. Maybe it's because there's no dynamic stability with the flight simulator. But when you get in the airplane, if you can keep that airplane on altitude, on airspeed, on heading, and brief the approach and fly the approaches with emergency procedures included and all that, and you do that well in the simulator, you're gonna do it well when you're flying the airplane. Tip number 5, staying ahead of the aircraft. You always want to stay ahead of the aircraft. You do not want that aircraft going anywhere that your mind hasn't gone at least 10 minutes beforehand. Always think ahead. Always anticipate your next move. This type of foresight is crucial when flying IFR. So what does staying ahead of the airplane even look like? It looks like when you're in range, you could go ahead and start working through your checklist. Go over the approach briefing. Discuss your field elevation, the type of approach that you want to shoot. Make sure you got the right radio frequencies queued up and ready to go. Know the course that you want to fly. Think about your glide slope, intercept, altitude at your final approach fix. Make sure you're staying on top of your minimums, and go over your missed approach procedure. Once you do that, now we can go ahead and brief the approach. After you brief the approach, then go ahead and make sure you have your approach loaded in the GPS ready to go. So when ATC starts giving you vectors, you're already ahead of the aircraft. You're ready to shoot the approach. Tip number 6, emergency procedures. Make sure you're regularly practicing and reviewing emergency procedures. In flight school, one thing myself and my flight mates did, we would go ahead and cover up certain instruments because we knew that our flight instructors were going to fail those. So we went ahead and we did that. We practiced partial panel, all right, flying partial panel a lot. We practiced that a lot. And we practiced flying around partial panel single engine a lot. So we were constantly going over emergency procedures, constantly putting ourselves in emergency scenarios in the aircraft, in IMC conditions, and we were just getting really, really good at that. So make sure that you are practicing those procedures, those emergency procedures, over and over and over again. The more you do it, the better you get. It's just going to become routine. Being prepared for any situation is the key to being a competent instrument rated pilot. Tip number 7, consistent practice. I hear a lot of people say practice makes perfect. Nah, perfect practice makes perfect. And if you go to a flight school like ATP or any one of those schools where you're on a schedule and you're consistently doing this every single day, then the flying regularly, that's going to happen. For you, those of you that are out here doing it on your own pace, on your own dime, that sort of thing, at a local FBO, make sure you're doing whatever you got to do in order to consistently fly, consistently shoot approaches. One thing that you can do, you can get a safety pilot, okay? Someone who has at least a private pilot's license to sit in the right seat while you're flying and shooting approaches. You can have a safety pilot helping you through this thing. Of course, like we said before, the simulators. There's a lot of different things that you could do to consistently make sure that you're going through your flows, make sure you're going through the whole process of instrument flying, and just a consistent practice. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And it's important that you do that because regular flying definitely improves your instrument flying skills. Tip number 8, choosing the right flight instructor. Now, if you go to a flight school like ATP, I keep bringing up ATP because that's where I went. A lot of times the flight instructor is chosen for you. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's terrible. But make sure you got the right flight instructor. If you're in one of those situations where you're at a school like that, and you and the flight instructor don't have a good relationship, it's okay to go to the chief pilot and talk about switching up flight instructors. I've done that before, and I've had to sacrifice some training days in order to make that happen, because the next flight instructor that was available was working with another student. So I had to wait until they were done, but I made that switch happen. For those of you going to the local FBO, you've got your choice. You've got your pick of the litter, so to speak. So make sure you got a good flight instructor, because your learning and your ability to grasp the information and to receive the information definitely depends on it. If you don't have a good relationship with your flight instructor, it definitely hinders your learning, because you're more focused on the fact that y'all are not clicking, and you're more focused on that, and you're more focused on wanting to find someone else. So make sure you got the right flight instructor. Take the time to make sure you're choosing the right one that is going to work with you and has your best interest. Tip number 9, mastering radio communications. Mastering radio communications and speaking with ATC is essential to being a good instrument rated pilot. Now, going to ATP, it's going to be you and a flight mate on these instrument cross countries, building up time for your commercial, right? One person is going to be pilot flying, the other one's going to be pilot monitoring. Usually the pilot monitoring is working the radios. Okay, some of you might be doing single pilot IFR, in which case you're definitely going to make sure you're on top of your radio communication skills and making sure that you are communicating effectively to ATC. And all that takes is just a little bit of practice. So you've been doing it a lot on your private pilot phase, and it should be routine and second nature by the instrument phase. But if it's not, go ahead and make sure you're working on that. Practice with a flight mate. Y'all could definitely do some dialogue, right, where one person's acting like ATC and you're making the radio calls that you need to make. And so make sure you're on top of the radio communication. Tip number 10, stay calm, stay focused. Instrument flying can be intense, so make sure you develop processes and systems to make sure that you're staying calm under pressure. There's been plenty of times where I've been in the soup or skirting around certain weather systems and punching in and out of these clouds, and the weather was sort of freaking me out. Not gonna lie, you're in the cloud and it goes from light gray to dark gray, and the intensity of the rain hitting the windshield, intensifies, and you're talking to ATC, you're trying to set up for the approach. It can be stressful. It can definitely be stressful. In those times, in those situations, controlling your breathing, focusing on what you got to do in order to successfully complete the approach, pop out of the weather, lined up with the runway, and touching down, rubber side down. All right. My way was just focusing on breathing as well as focusing on the task at hand, and trying to block out the external factors, such as the changing colors of the cloud and then the sound of the rain hitting the airplane, because it gets loud. And I don't care what kind of headset you got on, it sounds like sometimes it'll sound like you don't even have the headset on. And back then I did have a pair of ASA headsets with no noise canceling, so it might sound a little different nowadays with the Bose. Make sure you click on this video right here to learn about 7 things you should avoid on your pilot journey.